For the past few weeks, as my faithful Brittany Spaniels, Max and Pete, and I have been making our weekly journey to Montgomery to continue prepping our house and doing yard work, trying to get it ready to put on the market. During that drive, I've been listening to an audiobook version of John T. Edge's newly released memoir, House of Smoke. A Southerner goes searching for home. Now, John T., as most people call him, is the founder of the Southern Foodways Alliance out of Oxford, Mississippi. The author of books such as The Pot Liquor Papers, Southern Belly. His books, along with the work of the Southern Foodways Alliance, it seeks to tell the story of the South through its history and through its food. Now, if you're a football fan, especially college, probably watch the SEC network, you might know him from his show, True South. It's a show where he partners with his friend and executive producer, Wright Thompson, to tell the stories of different restaurants from across the SEC footprint. And he tells them through their cultural significance. Now, in recent years, his work has given me a new appreciation for food. You can probably tell I've already had a healthy one. But he's given me this new appreciation about food, especially looking at it through things like church cookbooks or, through the deeper histories of the places that he travels and places that I've called home for years. In his most recent book, House of Smoke, he begins to describe his childhood, growing up in Clinton, Georgia, which is located just outside of Macon. And he tells of his childhood idolization of Confederate generals, especially the one that lived in his house, and stories about the lost cause mythology that he recounted in his youth. As he continues telling the story, though, he quickly moves into some other memories. Memories of friendships, some cut short after his parents enrolled him in a private school that probably more accurately described as a segregation academy. He further tells of a traumatic event in his youth, and that, along with a less than stable home life, made for a very turbulent adolescence. I think it's probably more than fair to say that a lot of these challenges probably led to this difficult time in his undergraduate years in Athens at the University of Georgia. As I reread our gospel for this morning, this lesson kept popping up. I could hear this trepidation in the voices of the disciples. See, Jesus knows that hard times lie ahead for them and for him, but especially for those who have chosen to follow him. We don't hear these verses, but the verses that come right before our reading this morning, verses 1 through 4, in those verses, Jesus tells the disciples, instructs them not to be stumbling blocks to those who would come to follow him. He says that drowning would be preferable to leading someone astray. It's pretty heavy accountability right there. That responsibility sounds rather daunting. And this sounds a little harsh. So, not surprisingly, in response, the disciples plead with Jesus, increase our faith. To which Jesus replies with another question that really cuts to the heart. How much faith is enough? And what is it for? He tells the disciples that if they had but the faith of a mustard seed, they could command a mulberry tree to uproot itself and be planted in the sea. I think this reference to one of the tiniest of seeds, which yields a shrub, is juxtaposed with this relative enormity of a tree in the ocean. But a strong faith, one that endures in the midst of questions. What the disciples seem, I think, to begin to understand here is that faith doesn't come from following 10 easy steps. It's not a Betty Crocker easy bake faith. Faith is not the result of human effort. It's a gift from God. You've heard me say before that faith is full of doubt, full of questions. Yet Jesus tells us that faith the size of a mustard seed can move trees. I think faith is also maybe about inviting Jesus into the messiness of our lives. Lives that are so often full of doubt, full of questions. Inviting him, trusting that he will do that redemptive work through us. He will do that relational work of bringing about the kingdom. See, this is the kind of work we are called to make manifest in the world. When we cultivate this faith among our neighbors, by loving them where they are. When we do that, we are serving the image of Christ that is within them and within ourselves. We serve God. We serve one another, not for reward, not because we think it is how we get our ticket to heaven punched, but we do it because it is what is expected of us. I think this is the lesson of this rather uncomfortable question that Jesus asked in our reading this morning. Question about, would you invite the slave to the table after plowing the fields? As God's beloved creation, we are called to be in relationship with each other and to serve one another. We do this work that can at times be challenging, while at other times be joyful. We do it not for some perceived reward in this life or the next. I once read that faith is an ongoing spiral-like process of reflection, action, and grace, and one that deepens as we move through it. As I continued listening to John T. Edge's story, I heard this story of redemption. After having been expelled from the University of Georgia and working various jobs in or around the Atlanta area, his knack for storytelling never left him. Having seemingly wandered in this emotional wilderness through various jobs until one day he saw an advertisement for open enrollment at the University of Mississippi. He would go on to earn both his bachelor's and master's degrees in Southern Studies. And that childhood experience of performing and telling Civil War history evolved into something much deeper. He now tells the story of the South, tells it through its food and its people. Stories like that of servants in Montgomery who raised money from their cooking to support the Montgomery bus boycott. Stories about hippie agricultural communes in Tennessee. The stories he now tells, they reflect the various cultures and people that make up the South. As I listened, I could hear, not just in his words, but in his voice, the emotional mileage of his journey. I could hear the story of my South in his story. I could hear John T.'s gratitude for life in the way he reflected on his past and his present circumstances. Though he doesn't delve into spiritual life or religious views, or even if he is religious, but his story is one of faith. Wholeheartedly believe that it takes faith, a lot of it, to navigate life's ups and downs. And that's not to say that people in poverty or in the midst of sickness or hardship have less faith. In fact, I believe the opposite. Those who remain on the margins of society probably possess a faith even stronger than mine, simply to survive each day. When the disciples asked Jesus to increase their faith, I can only imagine him thinking, why aren't you getting this? Truth be told, he probably asked it a lot dealing with the disciples. But what Jesus is telling them, and I think telling us this morning, is that life will be hard. There will be rough patches. There will be loss, pain, seasons of uncertainty. As followers of Jesus, we are called to keep going, to put one foot in front of the other, and get knocked back, to start over again, to love one another, and to do the work of building up the kingdom. And doing that work not just when it's easy, but especially when it's not. Amen.